Okay, so today the sermon is on love. Okay, we read the word 1 John 3:16. So before this sermon, I was having a conversation yesterday with Yvonne about what the reading today is, and I was telling Yvonne that if you ask everybody says John 3:16 is the essence of the Bible, right? Because it says, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son." Right? So that's the essence of the Bible. But I always believed it's not John 3:16. It's actually 1 John 3:16. The reason is, can I see that on the slide? Next slide, please, guys. Yeah. So it says, 1 John 3:16 talks about God the Father, His love, and what He did. But 1 John 3:16 says, it's God's love, but we have to show that love to others. So John 3:16 is an example. 1 John 3:16 is practice. Get it? So if you only cling on to John 3:16, then you're only looking at God and saying, "God, thank you for your love. You're amazing, you're awesome," and we're stopping there. The moment you follow 1 John 3:16, that's when you put it into practice. Okay, especially I like the verse 18. It says, "My little children, let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed." Yeah, can we say that? But in deed and in truth, right? So a few months back, I was talking to somebody and they asked me, "What is your calling?" Whenever people ask me that, I get so excited because I know God has called me to talk about practical Christianity, okay? Practical Christian life, which is so important, all right? Sometimes we are very bothered about supernatural things, right? We're bothered about traditions, so many things. But many times we miss the basics, which is just living a normal Christian life, okay? So if you had noticed me preaching in the past few weeks, and also if you're following my YouTube channel or if you read my book on leadership, I would have constantly written about how to live practically in today's world, like today, as a child of God, right? Because I somehow feel it is very important. I still remember back in India, so I was part of a church, and I'm gonna change the name to Mr. and Mrs. Jacob, okay, for anonymity. So Mr. and Mrs. Jacob is this elderly uncle and auntie. So in India, we call everybody uncle and auntie, right? They need not be related. We just call everybody uncle and auntie. So they used to come to church, and in two-wheelers. So in India, we have two-wheelers. Everybody rides a two-wheeler. So uncle would ride, auntie would sit behind. They come to the church, and amazing worship, right? Lift their hands, and they talk in tongues. And during this testimony time, there'll be something for them to say and all of that. So I had a friend who always teases them because right after the service, okay, you have such a powerful service, all right? A fulfilling service. And you go out. So our church was right on the highway, okay? So you have to take an exit into the highway. So for you to go to the other side of the road, you'll have to go all the way around, like a kilometer past it, and then, take a U-turn and come back. So they didn't want to do that. So what they'll do is they'll try to sneak in between the barricade, and then they'll look for upcoming cars. And if there are no cars, they both would go away. So my friend would go stand there and say, "Uncle, you just, worshipped God, and Lord, you spoke in tongues, but basic thing, following the law, you missed." And he wouldn't listen. He was very angry with us back then. So the reason I'm saying this story is sometimes we, as people of God, we are sometimes very drawn to things that are super complicated, right? Oh, theology and supernatural miracles. So many things. And we sometimes miss out on basic lifestyle. There's an Indian saying that there was a person who said, I want to become God, I want to have superpowers and all of that. So one of the guys said, before that, first become a human. Okay, become a human, and then think about becoming a superpower or God himself. So today I'm going to take this word love, and in the whole concept of practicality, or in today's world, I'm going to try and see how we can apply the love that God gave us, and also look at how the love that God shows is very different from what the world interprets as love. Okay? We live in a time, for some reason, this word love, I think you'll all agree that it's the most abused, overused, misused word, right? So I've been listening to a lot of sermons on love. I was born in a Christian family, so most of the times preachers pick this topic, and all of them, or almost all of them, would always talk about how the word love in English is too generic, right? It's too generic. Love for everything, right? For example, parents love their children. Okay, that's love. But at the same time, the parents as spouses love each other, which is completely different love, right? And the family loves movies, which is a different love. The family loves a particular restaurant, that's a different love. And the Bible, if you see, talks about the love of money is the root of all evil, right? Love of money is the root of all evil. So that love is something even more different. It's greed, okay? And if you're a tennis fanatic like me, love means zero, right? So if you didn't score anything, tennis is so gentle. It doesn't say you didn't score anything. They say you scored love, all right? So, so love is, in English it's just generic, okay? So in Greek, there are 7 types of love, okay? If you're in theology and all of that, there is pragma, agape, eros, and so many different types of loves. And even in my mother tongue, you use love in different contexts. When my parents say, I love you, there's a different word. Whereas a boyfriend telling the girlfriend, I love you, that's totally different, all right? There's a different word. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take 3 types of love that the world, I don't think they'll understand, okay? If you tell your friends or colleagues who doesn't know or understand God and the scripture, they would not understand what we are talking about today. So the only way you and I can tell them is by practicing these 3 types of loves that the Bible teaches us, okay? So can we go to the next slide? Yeah, the next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah. So the first one, I'm going to talk about conditional love that the world knows versus the unconditional love that God talks about. Okay? So it is, I think it's very obvious. You all know, right, how the world, even when they love, there is a reason behind. There are ulterior motives. There is a reason why people love or show love. And especially, I'm from India, and in India, the whole word volunteering doesn't make any sense. Nobody understands the word volunteering because we are a group of people who always want something in return, right? So if I tell somebody that I'm going to go and help somebody, the next question they'll ask is, but for what? What are you going to get in return? And if I say, nothing, I'm just going to help them. And they're like, the next question they'll ask is why? Why do you want to help somebody when you're not getting anything in return, right? So volunteering is not a big hit in at least in our country. So when I came to Canada, for me it was very new, because people were like, I went to volunteer there, I went to volunteer here. And my question was why? Why do you volunteer? So the world, I don't know, somehow there is a reason why everything is done, because there is always an expectation of something in return. And sometimes the love that is shown also is not unconditional. But the Bible talks about unconditional love, which means no terms, No, the disclaimer is absolutely no terms. So in today's world, if you want to buy a car, it says, own this car for $19,999. And you're like, wow, that's a good price. And on top of it, you'll see that a small asterisk sign, a star. And that means terms and conditions apply. And when you go in, then you'll know that you'll have to add another $10,000 to buy that same car, right? So everything in the world today has some sort of, there's some motive. They're drawing you, they're talking, they're trying to gain your interest, all of it for some particular reason. So in a world like that, which is very, selfish is a very hard word, but yeah, where love is not pure, we as people of God, sometimes when we go and show unconditional love, the world doesn't understand. Why? Why are you doing this, right? Why do you want to, go out of your bounds to help somebody? What is your return? What is your return of investment of your time that you're doing it? So there is a story of, I would call him a spiritual leader or a wise man. Let's put him as a wise man. And he had a lot of followers, right? And this wise man was just walking, and the followers just following him. And they were going past a pond where a scorpion had accidentally fallen inside the pond, and it was trying to crawl up. And it couldn't. So every time it tried crawling up, it would slip and fall, and it would try. And so when the wise man saw that, so he reached out his hand to help the scorpion out of it. So what does the scorpion do? Right? It stung him more. Right? So when it did, the wise man, he just had a lot of pain, but he went once again to help the scorpion out of it. So it hit him again. So this happened a couple of times until his palm was bruised with a lot of stings. But even through that, he ended up taking the scorpion and putting it out, and the scorpion just crawled away, right? So his followers asked him, so Guru, the scorpion did not even understand that you're helping you, right? It was stinging you, it was hurting you. Now why did you help, right? And the Guru said, well, it's the quality of the scorpion to hit people when they try to touch it, right? That's why it's got the claw or whatever. But it's the duty or the quality of humans to help. So I did what I'm supposed to do. The scorpion did what it's supposed to do. And that's why I helped it. So this is unconditional love, right? There is, even though the scorpion hurt that person was still genuinely interested in the well-being of the scorpion and helped. And that's why I put this image. Would anybody know what the name of the family is and the person next there? Anybody? Naveen, you should know. Yes, you know. Okay, so this is a missionary. He's actually a doctor. His name is Dr. Graham Staines. And in the year 2000, before that, he lived in India for like 30 years. He was a doctor who was attending to the local remotest villages in India. And he was actually helping people with leprosy. So whoever had leprosy, he was a specialist in leprosy, and he was helping them. And they were ardent Christians and very high faith people. And the locals did not like it. And they did something extremely detestable, something that even today I cannot imagine. I cannot, I have 2 children, and I cannot imagine those 2 lovely children there. So one night, after they finished the medical camp, it got too late, so they locked themselves in their Jeep, right? They had a Jeep. And as they were sleeping, the guy you see next, so this person gathered a mob of 30, 40 people and set the Jeep on fire with those 2 children inside. And when they tried to escape, they forced them inside, and the 3 bodies were charred to death. And it made huge news in India, and a lot of things happened. But the highlight of the story is his wife, Gladys Staines, and daughter, Esther Staines. Now, they were not, on that day, they were not in the Jeep, so they escaped. So they had to endure this. 30 years, they had served a community when in India, medical is not free. And leprosy is treated as extremely untouchable. So if anybody had leprosy, they were treated as untouchables in villages and all. This family touched the hands of lepers, brought them, applied cream, and gave them all the medical things. And this family was from Australia. He would have easily earned millions back in Australia and live a very, high life. But all the sacrifice of this family ended in giving up that father and the 2 sons to flames. And the entire nation was actually looking at what Gladys would say. Okay? So she didn't cry much. And after all the news and all of that has died down, she went and met this guy in prison. And she said, "I forgive you." I don't know. As a mother of 2 children, losing those 2 children, facing the very murderer and saying, "I forgive you because my God taught me to forgive." All right? So, unconditional love is that, You go, you lose your, sometimes you'll have to lose your status. You'll have to lose your place. You might have to sometimes lose money and lose your face and reputation and all of that. But you push all of that aside, and then you go in. And then even though if it hurts us, we go in and shower the love of God. And that's unconditional love, which exactly what Christ did on the cross. And I always say the time of Christmas, though it's a celebration, right? It's a celebration of Christ being born. It's a celebration for us. But Christ, he came with a motive. And the motive was not to just be born in Herod's palace, right? Silver spoon, right? Enjoying his life. And then, showing himself as the king. That was not his plan. He came down, lived as a very normal, humble human. He showed the unconditional love of becoming that person. And not only that, dying a gruesome death, which is the most important part of Christmas, okay? Though his birth is happiness, his death, that is where the redemption is. So what is a practical lesson that you and I can learn from this is, love is misinterpreted in today's world, okay? It is misinterpreted, it is treated differently, it is abused and legalized in so many ways. And certain things that we cannot even believe, like why things are happening around the world. How is it even possible? At this time, it is our duty as a child of God to go and show the unconditional love that Christ displayed. Okay? So the first one is unconditional love. And we could talk for hours about unconditional love because it is something that's unfathomable. I mean, why? Why would somebody, love so much? All right? But in the interest of time, I'm going to move to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, this is something that I want to show. That is, forgiveness is actually born out of unconditional love. So you cannot just say forgive. You cannot just say, I forgive, and still remember things, okay? And that's what Gladys told. He said, I cannot just leave these people who love and trust us, in quotes, also the ones who killed her own husband and 2 children. She said, I have high regard for the people of India and their tolerance. And today, as we are talking, she's serving the lepers in India in the same soil, to the same people who, caused all the grief in her family. She didn't return back to Australia. Okay, so I want us to take this as a challenge and say, Lord, yes, I enjoy your unconditional love. I understand your unconditional love. But can you, God, please help me share it with people? Okay, I cannot tell them. If I tell them, nobody's going to understand. But can I practice? Lord, help me to practice unconditional love. The next love that God shows, to the next slide, please, is boundless or limitless love. Okay? So, again, like how I said previously, like every type of love in this world today has some sort of condition, right? And also some sort of limit, okay? So there are people who help or show love, but then there are limits, at certain points, people are like, you know what, that's it, I cannot go more than this because I don't see any value in this. So one of the examples, Psalms 136, if you can go home and read Psalm 136. I like the way the psalmist sang, psalms about singing songs, right? So the psalmist just sings saying, oh Lord, give thanks to the Lord, for his love endures forever. The entire 26, 27 verses, it always ends with his love endures forever, forever, forever. Because God's love is not limited like our love, right? It's somehow limitless, it's boundless. Okay, God keeps coming back even though we constantly fail, we constantly fall, we constantly insult and constantly disrespect God. But there's no time that God says, you know what, enough, right? Enough with you, and just leave us. Okay, one of the examples that I like to quote here is about the prodigal son, right? So, prodigal son is about, we all know the story. 2 sons. One son went to the father and said, give me half my inheritance. And today's world and the previous world, in the past history, when somebody says, write a will for me or give me your inheritance, that actually means the dad is dead, so which means whatever's rest is divided, right? So it is in a way telling that, you are no longer alive. I don't need you. I just need your money. That's exactly what he said. So when he took half the portion, he not only took the money, but he also gave up the sonship. He said, you're no longer my dad. I'm no longer your son. All I needed is the money. Got the money. He went, thinking that money is going to help him, enjoy his life. But things didn't go as per plan. He wasted all the money, and then he sat, among the pigs, and then thought, oh my God, if my dad's servants have good food to eat, and I'm eating, the food that pigs eat. So if you look at Luke 15, if you read it carefully, he didn't say that I'm going to go back to my dad and say, sorry, Dad, can I become your son again? That was not his plan, right? He actually wanted to go back and ask his dad what? That, can you please add me as one of your servants? Just make me your servant. Don't even recognize me as your son, right? So he knows that love has limits. He had crossed that limit long time back. He declared that, Dad, you're dead. I don't need you. I need your money. And if I am taking the money from you, it's an agreement that we are no longer related, right? So he knows that the limit, the boundary has been crossed. And that's why he said, I will not go and tell my dad that, I want to be your son again. I want to say, at least let me be your servant so that I get food to eat. And the Bible says when he was walking a long way, I like how Jesus, narrated this story, right? So he said, while he was a long way down, he could actually see his father waiting and looking that someday my son will return, all right? So which means even though the son said, you're dead, you and I, there's no relationship anymore, right? We are like strangers altogether. The dad did not agree or did not accept that. He might have given away the portion of his inheritance, but he never gave the sonship, or he never gave his fatherhood away. And that's why he ran, hugged him. I mean, imagine a guy who was sitting with pigs and traveling for like a week. How much of stink, he would be stinking. He would have looked so bad. But it didn't matter. For a father, it didn't matter at all. When he found his son, he would have grown beard, right? He would have, become dark or, with the sun, and he would have looked different. But it didn't matter at all, right? When he saw him at a distance, even before the son could come to the dad went running to the son and hugged him and gave him a signet ring and took him into the house as his son, not the servant, okay? And he threw a party. And the strangest thing is when the brother came, I always think it's a very fair thing for the brother, right? This guy is with the dad, taking care of the dad, helping the dad. He didn't get to, earn the inheritance, right? So if there was $100 or 100 gold coins, so ideally 2 sons would have said, I'll get 50, and my brother's going to get 50. That's what the older brother thought, right? Now, the 50 coins are now wasted, and now we have just only 50 coins. Now, if the father brings the son again as a son, now he has to again, when he writes the will, he has to divide it. Now, how much he'll get? He'll get just 25, right? And the prodigal son would get 75, right? It's unfair. It's very, very unfair. So that's why he was genuinely angry. He went to his dad and said, I am with you all the while. You've not even cooked a soup for me. But this guy who plundered your wealth, who rejected you, right? Who ran away, right? And he's come back, and now you're throwing a party. And the father rightly puts, saying, he was dead, and he is alive. Because Father's love is limitless. It's boundless. So, with the interest of time, I had when I was in a church, and even before I got married and all, there used to be a person, a panhandler, right? In India we call them beggars, but I think it's too crude to call somebody a beggar. But then he used to sit there and ask for alms, okay? And he didn't have legs, so I think he lost it in an accident. So I used to give him money every day after the church. And one day this person came to me and said, if you give me more money, I can, had a prosthetic leg and, then. So I was genuinely interested. So what I said was, I'll give you the money, but it was a steep amount. Okay, it's not a small amount. So we had to give some money to this person. And I gave it. And the next week, he, instead of, he used to sit in a small wheel cart or something and, drag himself to places. But now, since he has a prosthetic leg, he came in crutches, right? So I was so happy. Oh my God, it was so fulfilling that, I was able to influence this person's life. And the next week, he again came in his cart. So I asked him, what happened? So he said, I accidentally broke my prosthetic leg. And so I went to the doctor again, and he's asking like 5-6 times the money, because the first time was, government subsidy, and now. So now it was an even more steeper amount. So I didn't have that much money. But since I was genuinely interested with this guy, I talked to the church and the committee and all of them and said, we have to help him. And that's when one of them said, I know that guy. He's a scammer, right? You're not supposed to do this to him. So he said, the next Sunday, I'll come and talk, when you talk to him. So he came along, and we asked him, why, how it happened, and he had a big story and all of that. And then finally, the brother who came with me said, yes, we will give you the money, but the only thing is we'll have cops here to, get your signature. And when he heard the word cop, I can see him, just uses that cart and just run away from us. So we didn't chase him or anything. But then after he went away, that's what that brother said. These guys are all scammers. He would have borrowed the prosthetic from somebody to just fool you, because he knows that you're, giving him money, so he can just scam you more. This hurt me a lot. I was genuine. Like for the past few months, I've been shelling out money on this person. And how, I felt so bad that for a few months after that, if anybody asked for help, I used to be very doubtful and all of that. Now, the reason I'm saying this is, love is limited, right? Sometimes a pastor might be a person who can tell, he deals with so many people. It's, how much can you do, right? You do so much, and at the end of the day, when you don't see the respect given back, we give up hope and we say, you know what, that's it. But God, it's boundless. We fail, we constantly fail, and God never gives up on us. If you go to the next slide, I've written something like, if God had allocated only a certain amount of love, we would have exhausted it long time back itself, right? If God had said, okay, every human, this is the love I'm going to give, use it wisely. I think a child, by its constant whining and crying, would exhaust in the first few days. But Romans 8:38-39 says, for I'm sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height or depth, nor anything else in creation will be able to separate us from the love of God, because it's boundless. So it doesn't mean that we can fail and play around like the guy who played with me, scammed me. So the question here is, are you someone who respects God's boundless love? Or are you a scammer, right, who scams God's benevolence? I'll let you think about it. The last one that I want to talk about is sacrificial love. Again, something that the world doesn't understand, because sacrifice involves a lot of humility, right? You need to let go of something something that you hold so close in order for somebody else to be happy. That's sacrifice, right? You let go of something that you hold so close. Explain it to the world. The first question is why? Because we live in a time where there's so much of self, right? If you actually look at today's problem, my wife and I, we always used to sit and discuss about it. The core of today's problem is there's a lot of self, me, right? It's me. So when me comes first, then everything else takes a second place. So much so that we have spoiled our relationships. We've spoiled our health. We have screwed up our morals. And the word morals is now a bad word, right? Because self is more important than anything else. That's what in today's world we are in. But sacrificial love is not about me. It's about what I like the most, but I give it up for something else. A few weeks back, during Nolan's christening, Pastor was talking about sacrificial love, about Abraham and Isaac, sorry, I thought it's Adam. Yeah, Abraham and Isaac. So, have you ever seen this video of Abraham sacrificing Isaac? It's always, I somehow feel that it's not completely the truth, because Isaac is always portrayed as a very obedient boy, right? So all the way, Isaac says, "Dad, where's the sacrificial lamb?" And Abraham constantly says, "Hey, God will provide, right?" So at the mount, when he had set up the altar and everything, and when he turned to Isaac and said, "Son, you know what? You are the sacrificial lamb." The videos, you see YouTube and all of that, it shows Isaac as a very nice guy. He lies down, he's crying, I don't think that's true, right? Isaac would have, Abraham was 100 years old when this happened. He would have thought, what is wrong with this old man? I think his brain is, he would have tried to escape, right? Abraham should have, ran, right? Or dragged him, correct, Pastor Gary? And when he put him on the altar, he would have resisted. But there would have been a lot of force. And Isaac would have constantly said, "Dad, are you mad?" I don't know, whatever he said. But it wasn't a pleasant thing like the video portrays. But Abraham knew that God did not give it as an option. It's a command, so he has to do it. And God, if you read the Bible, it says, he reveals a secret to us. He said, God wanted to test Abraham, so he did this. So we know that this will end end happy. But he didn't tell that to Abraham. He didn't say that, "I want to test you." He said, "Go, sacrifice your son." So he did all of that. Now, I like the verse where when he was about to sacrifice, the Bible says, in the thicket of the thorns, there was a ram like that, which was caught, whose horn was caught. And the father and son were very happy that they had to, take the ram or a lamb and sacrifice that instead of of Isaac. So the father had two options. One, a son, and some random lamb that was already caught in the thicket of some thorns, right? A few thousand years later, at the cross of Calvary, a very similar thing happened. All right? A very similar thing happened. Now, I want to narrate another thing that I heard. I don't know if I heard or read somewhere, but it has made such a big impact in my life, and I want to narrate this. In the year 2004, I guess, there was a tsunami that hit the entire world, right? So I was in India, and the news told that the sea has come inside the land, and we were all laughing about it because it'll be nice to have sea inside because nobody knew what a tsunami was, how much of destruction it's going to bring, and nobody knew. Even the news didn't know. So they just said, sea has come inside. Only later we knew the devastations it caused, right? So there's a story of a mother and her two children in some remote village, but some coastal village, okay? Now the two children are playing, on the beach, right? And the mother is staying a little closer to the land or farther away from the sea, but her eyes always on the two children. And now she notices that the sea is receding, right? The sea is going back and becoming that big wall. Nobody has heard a tsunami, so she was like also, not knowing what to do. But the moment she knew that something is going to go wrong, the story says that she ran and grabbed both the kids, and she ran away from, or tried to run into the land. Now it was too late, but the water has hit. And if you know tsunamis, more than the way it hits, the bigger destruction is when it recedes back, like when it actually pulls things back, right? The mother had two children in her hand, and the water is now pulling them back. So somehow she was able to hold her leg, one of her legs, hold on to a pillar, okay? So somehow she was able to hold it, a pillar, and two kids. But she knows she cannot hold for too long because the water current was pulling so much. So she had two options. That's what I read. It said, one was she tries her best. At some point, she lets go of her leg, and all three of them are into the sea. Two kids don't know how to swim. They're going to definitely drown. She could swim, somehow escape. That was one. But the second option, which is the most painful one, was instead of letting both the kids die, okay, she could choose to save at least one. You know how? By letting go of one and using a hand to hold on to the pillar. But the question is, which one? Right? At that moment, which one to let go and which one to hold? I have two sons, right? And I cannot imagine, again, a scenario like that. And I know parents sitting here, we know. But the mother had to act quick. So the story says that she let go of one and somehow clung to the pillar and somehow saved the other child, all right? And somehow they were rescued, and in the rescue camp, they were kept. It is said that the mom didn't sleep. She refused to eat. She refused to drink. She was just sitting there. And one of the attenders, I think that was a person who wrote the story, right? That person said she told her that when she let go of that one child, the last thing she saw was the eyes of that child looking to the mother saying, "How can you do this?" And then that's it, the child was washed away. She's happy, she saved one. The child was playing in front of her now. It is said that 2-3 days later, the mom committed suicide because she could no longer bear that guilt of letting go of that one child. As hard as it sounds, I somehow feel, there's a big relationship between the Abraham and Isaac story with the Calvary, the cross on Calvary, and the story that we just saw. At the cross, Father God had two options, right? One is to save his only begotten son, and then let go of humanity, and humanity is destroyed and problem done. But the other option is to let the son, his only begotten son, sacrifice himself so that you and I can live. And unlike Isaac, that's why I said Isaac. Unlike Isaac, Jesus, our big brother, did not resist. He did not run away. When there was an option, when the call was to save humanity, there needs to be a sacrifice. Christ stepped forward. He stepped forward and said, I will sacrifice. I am willing to be the sacrificial lamb for the benefit of you and me. And that's why in the Garden of Gethsemane, right, Jesus Christ prayed so much. The Bible says that he was so stressed and so much, in that anxiety that his sweat came out as blood, right? Blood was, coming out as sweat because the pain that he had to endure was very, intense, and he knows it because he's not God, right? He's human. He feels pain, right? So it's not that he can magically pretend that he's, enduring pain and, somehow escape, right? So the cross of Calvary is actually a sacrifice, right, done on our behalf, all right? So there is a child, if that story I told you was true, there is a child somewhere in the world that's living, right? That child could have finished the university degree, married, have kids, working in a good place or something. That child is happy and living today because that person's sibling was let go by their parent. If the parent had chosen the other one, this person would be in the sea, and the other person would have lived. But the very life that person is living today is because of the sacrifice of two people, the mother and the brother or the sibling. So it's high time for us to understand that sacrificial love, especially what Christ showed, right, is not a small thing. It's not something simple. Oh, there's a cross that Jesus Christ. It's a big decision. Jesus Christ could have opted out, right? He could have easily opted out. But the Bible says that Jesus Christ himself, right, was more than willing, and that he readily accepted that sacrifice. If you go to the next slide. I like the song we sang today, right? It says, there's one line that I love the most in that song. It says, the Father turned his face away. Did you notice that in the song that we sang? The Father turned his face away. Every time I sing that song, I get reminded of this particular story that I told you, how the mother had to just turn her face away, letting go of one of the kids. And same what God the Father did. He just had to just close his ears and say, I know my son is suffering, but you know what, I'm yet willing to sacrifice him for the benefit of my children, whom he created. So with all that we learned today, I've taken a lot of time, sorry, but all that we learned today, the three types of love that we learned is that the unconditional love, the limitless or boundless love that Christ shows, and the last thing is the sacrificial love that God shows. And it's high time that we show this to our people around, okay? Not only tell, right? But to show it in practice. So the 1 Corinthians 12, if you read to it, right? It starts off with supernatural things, right? It talks about how speaking in tongues and all big things, all right? Very complicated stuff that many of us don't understand. I personally don't understand many of the supernatural things. But the last verse, right? The last verse of that chapter is actually a precursor to the chapter 13, which talks all about love. And Paul beautifully writes, saying, and yet, can we all read it? And yet, I will show the most excellent way. And then he starts talking about love, which means the foundation of our very faith is is love. If there is no love, there is no Christmas, there is no Calvary, there's no redemption, and there's no peace, right? And there's no joy if there is no love, all right? As the music team comes up and we sing the song, I want all of us to ask God this thing, that God, I cannot show unconditional love. I'm limited. I cannot show unconditional love. Lord, my love has boundaries, right? And I cannot sacrifice. I don't have the humility to sacrifice. But we're going to just ask as we sing this song, let's say, God, help me to practice these three things. That even before I talk, right? Even before I give a Bible to somebody, even before I tell about Jesus to somebody, right? I don't have to do all of that. Even before that, we can demonstrate the love.